I've also had this happen with clients, like they have this lesson that they learned in life, but they've had like several experiences that they could share that taught them that lesson. And then I'll always be like, well, depending on your audience, like pick one and then go. Or, I mean, that might be a way to do it. Or maybe you can ask a friend, like, which one would be most significant for me to share? Which one's gonna get the audience closer to the transformation that I want them to have? Or what's gonna help them feel the emotion that I was feeling in that moment? Welcome to the Storycraft Podcast for storytellers. I'm your host, Meg Adams, and I'm here to help you explore how stories shape our connections. Wondering how stories help you network and advance? Looking to bridge online and face-to-face worlds, foster understanding, and ignite innovation? Look no further. Whether you're a leader, communicator, educator, or just love a good story, join us for actionable insights and real talk with professional storytellers, all aimed at helping you build stronger, better connections. So clients come to me all the time and they ask me how to organize their stories. So this podcast episode is going to be directed to people who are trying to organize stories, organize several stories into one large purpose. So an example of that would be if you're giving a keynote or a presentation at work, or you're headed into an interview. But this is where you can prepare a little bit and have some stories lined up that are leading to some greater message, if you will. So I work with a lot of clients who are delivering presentations, working on a keynote, just trying to get their life story together for their brand so that they can have like this one thematic, gradually increasing series of stories that can help people understand who they are and what they're about. And so that they can communicate that in like 45 minutes or 30 seconds, right? So we kind of go through their story. I'm using air quotes if you aren't watching the video. And we break that down into little, I shouldn't say little, but the significant stories that have led them to some insight or have led them to kind of persuade an audience, if you will, or make a point in their presentation, keynote, again, meeting perhaps. Pitch is another way that you would use stories in this area. So how do you organize it? This is what I hear people say a lot. So I'm just going to lay it all out there for you and let you know what I do with clients. So hopefully you can do this maybe with a friend, or you can try and do it with yourself to help organize your story. So the first thing that I do when I get on a call with a client who needs help is I say, I'm pausing for a dramatic effect. I say, tell me your story. Tell me your story in a way that you would tell it to someone who has never met you. And off they go. And so I'm listening to their story. And I should also preface this by saying, before we meet, we talk about, what their purpose is. So what do they want their audience to feel, or what message do they want to communicate to their audience through their story? Their grand story, which is a series of stories. So I have that in mind. So you should definitely have that in mind. That is like step number one. What is your purpose in delivering your pitch, in giving a keynote, in going into this interview, like in communicating? What is your purpose? What do you want to communicate through your story? So what's the one thing that you want audiences to take away from your talk, their interactions with you, etc.? And then how do you want them to feel? Okay? So once you figure those things out, then you tell your story. Just go for it. No, I would just say, as I always tell students, turn the no voice off in your head and just go for it. So if you're doing this on your own, write it down. You could even click the camera on your phone or your laptop and just record yourself. Okay, I'm just gonna tell my story. Tell my story. What does it look like? A lot of times this happens is people will tell their story chronologically. Well, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then it's like, okay, well, however you need to get it out, get it out. Journal it. If you're a talker and you'd rather talk it out, record it on a laptop or your phone. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna rewatch that video or look at what you wrote down, and you're gonna look for themes. So you want to look for like, ooh, okay, well, like this seems to be really important to me in my life, this particular theme. Or man, now I understand this core value and why this message is so important to me. Like I can pull it out of this particular experience. So you look for those themes. That's the second part. See if you can pull it. Are you talking about the same things? A lot of times it's really interesting. I was working with a client not too long ago, and the theme of like guilt came up. I was listening to her. I'm like, wow, it sounds like you had a lot of guilt over these things, and that's what led you to her transformation process. Like you got over that guilt. And she was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that I'd said the word guilt so many times, or as she was talking, that I experienced so much guilt. But she didn't realize it until she had spoken it out loud. And I was like, okay, well, that's an emotion that your audience can identify with. After you figure out what themes that you want to pull from your story, then you want to look for experiences. So what are the experiences that you've had in your life? Do you see them? So I think of experiences as scenes. So, okay, this was a scene or an experience where I learned this thing. And then this thing that I learned transitioned to this thing. And then I had this experience that led me to learn this thing. And so hopefully you're following me. If you can't see, I'm sort of using my hands to, you're not watching the video, to build this idea of each experience that you've had. You want to take your audience through how you learned, what brought you to your final transformation, or the thing that you're giving them, the big lesson, the big impact, the big takeaway. When you tell your stories in sequential order, sequential order that makes sense, you're leading them there. You're hopefully like teaching them, you're bringing them along in your life story to teach them what you learned. And you're showing them what you learned by sharing your experiences. So that's that power of storytelling. So that's how I always do it. And that's what I look for with clients. So I love listening to this. And I love listening to people's stories, I should say. And if you want to try and do this on your own, again, I would highly recommend writing your story down, or again, recording it and then looking for those things. Look for themes, look for experiences, or think of like scenes in your life, and then sort of treat it like, okay, here was the experience in scene 1, and that was the takeaway, right? And then scene 2, and then this was the takeaway, and then scene 3, and then this thing was the takeaway, and they're all leading you to that larger takeaway or impact or transformation that you want your audience to have. And so when I work with people, it's like a big puzzle. Like I love listening to their stories and trying to put those pieces together for them, to try to pull those stories out. And so this might be a process that you need to do over a couple times. Maybe you write your story down your first time and you're like, oh, I need to think more about that. Let me pull that out a little more. You can work with a coach like me if you want to help this process along, or there are lots of storytelling coaches out there. I definitely have a few I can recommend if you'd like as well. But that to me is really like the beauty of the process. The other thing you can do is you can have a friend or someone you admire who maybe is a good storyteller, a good effective communicator, look at it and say, okay, like, what do you think? What do you see are there any themes that I'm missing? What experiences should I share? Maybe it's like, I've also had this happen with clients, like they have this lesson that they learned in life, but they've had like several experiences that they could share that taught them that lesson. And then I'll always be like, well, depending on your audience, like pick one and then go. Or, that might be a way to do it. Or maybe you can ask a friend, like, which one would be most significant for me to share? Which one's gonna get the audience closer to the transformation that I want them to have? Or what's gonna help them feel the emotion that I was feeling in that moment? So there's all kinds of ways to do that. But hopefully this helps you as you create your stories. Again, sometimes it's like those mini stories that lead to the big story that is your story. But once you have this story map, or you have this these stories put together in a way that makes sense to you, you can pull from them. So you can pull from them if you need to give a 10-minute talk or a 15-minute talk, or you only have 5 minutes for an elevator pitch. You can attach those stories to a lesson or to that larger transformation impact that you want to have. So I hope that this helps you as you think about organizing your story. We're so glad you've listened to this podcast episode. If you liked it, would you mind doing us a favor? Share this episode with someone who would be interested in the topic too. We're on a mission to help everyone become a better storyteller. And don't forget to subscribe to the show to get updated every time we release a new episode. Each and every episode is produced, hosted, and edited by us, Meg and Kyle Adams at Homeplace Creative. Happy storytelling!